Hey, what's up there, YouTubers? Adjumants and Job coming to you guys here today with another deck tech. So today we're going to be taking a look at another standard aggro deck, and it is Jund Aggro. So Jund is a color combination of green, red, and black, and for this aggro deck, it has a really well-rounded base of creatures and removal elements that we have, as well as every potential thing that we can run in these colors. So it definitely has a really strong role as being an aggro deck because it has really solid creatures that some of them, well, the majority of them have haste, so we have the means of being able to swing in on the turn that we're actually casting them. So that's definitely nice for the deck. The removal spells make it really nice because we can deal with a lot of things, and ultimately, if the deck needs to take a more defensive role, it can do that whenever we're like on the play up against other aggro-based decks. So we're going to break it down here today and take a look at what this deck actually looks like. But if you guys have any suggestions for decks that you would like to see, please leave them down in the comments below. And I'll take them into consideration for future deck techs. Now, the first thing that we're taking a look at here is the land base of the deck. So we do run a whole lot of dual lands in here as far as like shock lands go, but they're pretty much necessary. We do take the 2 life off of them to interact with creatures that we want to play in the given turn. So we have a playset of Overgrown Tombs. We have a playset of Stomping Grounds. Playset of Blood Crypts. And there's one overly attached Woodland Cemetery that just wants to jump in the bunch there. So playset of Blood Crypts. Playset of Woodland Cemeteries. We have 2 Dragonskull Summits. 2 Rootbound Crags, 3 Forests, and 1 single Swamp. So red is kind of like the more of like a splash, even though we have a decent amount of red things going on for us in the deck and also like in the sideboard as well. Red's more of the splash. Green and black are the base colors to this deck, and those are the things that we really want to stress on. Green is definitely important for things like turn 2 Strangleroot Geist, so I wanted to have some forests in here, but rather than have just like 4 forests, I decided to put in 1 more swamp to have more of a concrete base of black as well, because that 1 source of black could mean the difference in a game, whether you're playing like Lotleth Troll and like leaving 1 mana open or going for a double black for Victim of Night, something like that. I wanted to run a little bit more black as well. Only 2 and 2 for Dragonskull Summit and Rootbound Crag, just because when we start running more dual lands, it actually ends up becoming worse because we have more of those dual lands in our deck, and if we get an opening hand of like 2 of those dual lands as opposed to like 1 shock land and 1 of the core set duels, it ends up becoming worse just because we can't keep up with the tempo that maybe another deck would be able to produce, like Red Deck Wins or something like that, Boros Aggro even. So ended up cutting it to just having 4 2 and 2 for the core set duels. So it ends up working very well for us. As for the rest of the deck, starting off with our creatures in ascending order, we have Experiment 1, so he's a 1/1 for 1 green with Evolve. And if we want to remove 2 counters from him, 2 +1/+1 counters that is, we can regenerate him, which is a really nice means to having him survive spot removal, which our opponent's going to not want to use spot removal on him unless they really need to. But at that moment, he essentially just becomes smaller instead of just being removed off the field. So whenever we're successfully able to keep on evolving him, he ends up being much more resilient. So playset of Experiment 1. We're also running Flinthoof Boar here, so essentially 3/3 for 2, but he's a 2/2 for 2 as it is, and he gets +1/+1 as long as we control a mountain. And for 1 red, he can gain haste, which is a nice means of having another creature in here that has the potential of swinging in whenever it becomes just dropped on the field. So 3 Flinthoof Boar. It's not necessary to have a playset of him in here, just because he's pretty much a plain vanilla creature as far as anything goes for us. So he's not amazing, but he is really solid to have in here. From there, we have Strangleroot Geist, so Haste Undying, 2/1 for double green. So like I mentioned, we want to have a steady base of green so we can successfully play our sources of green and have him come in and be able to swing in on turn 2. So he's also good with the Undying because he survives any hate spells that our opponent may try to play against us, as well as wrath abilities that control would have, like Supreme Verdict. Obviously, Terminus is going to deal with it, no problem, but anything with massive just creatures die type abilities. Strangleroot gets there, Experiment 1 gets there, and also Strangleroot Geist coming into the battlefield from the grave with Undying is really nice just because he's already going to be bigger. He's going to be a 3-2 when he's coming in, so that can trigger off Evolve if the Experiment 1 isn't like already bigger or something like that. So it's a nice little thing to keep in mind and pay attention for. If the Undying's coming in and Experiment 1's a little bit smaller, it will trigger. From there, we have Lotleth Troll, so we're running a playset of Lotleth Troll here, and I'll grab one of my English ones just because I like playing with Japanese cards. But Lotleth Troll has Trample. We can discard a creature card and give him a +1/+1 counter, and we can also regenerate him. So Lotleth Troll is really, really tremendous in this deck as a 3-drop. And I say 3-drop because if we play him turn 2, our opponent has a really good chance of just being able to burn him out and not really have to worry about it. But whenever it comes to playing him on turn 3 and keeping 1 black mana open, he becomes really resilient in that our opponent doesn't really have a whole lot of ways unless they want to trade 2 removal spells for 1 to just be able to definitely get rid of him. So Lotleth Troll is really nice. If we want to make him bigger, if we want to discard something like Dreg Mangler to be able to scavenge it next turn, he becomes a little bit bigger. We have the potential of regenerating him. We have that ability to do that, but I oftentimes just find myself keeping him a little bit smaller until we get like into things like Dreg Mangler. But ultimately, he's really nice. He's a really good blocker for other aggro-based decks, and he's really hard to get rid of. Moving on, we have the Dreg Mangler that we mentioned. So haste 3/3 for 3 with scavenge for 5. So there obviously is that level of synergy where we would be using it alongside Lotleth Troll into enabling the scavenge to work for us, but ultimately he's a perfect creature for an aggro-based deck. He's a 3/3 for 3 with haste that is pretty well-rounded. Even if we need to block with him, he's still a 3 toughness creature with also 3 power, so it can block most things as well. So he's pretty nice. We have Ghor-Clan Rampager in here, so 4/4 for 4 with Trample and Blood Rush for 2, 1 red and 1 green to give target attacking creature +4/+4 and Trample. So if it means connecting and being able to win the game off of just dealing like 1, 2, 3, or 4 more damage, Ghor-Clan Rampager definitely gets us there, even if our opponent's like blocking some sizable creature of ours already, like if it's a Lotleth Troll that was scavenged on and like maybe I discarded another creature or something like that. If it's already like a big creature and the trample is going to get there, and if we want just a little bit more trample, Ghor-Clan Rampager gets there. Experiment 1, if that's already kind of sizable, putting +4/+4 and trample on it's pretty good. There's definitely things that the Ghor-Clan Rampager can just make better. And that's the thing about him is I find myself using Blood Rush a little bit more than I would use him as a creature. There are situations if I need more blockers up against aggro variants where I would play Ghor-Clan Rampager, Evolve, Experiment 1, and then like essentially have 2 4/4s on the battlefield aside from anything else I may have. So it's definitely nice to be able to trigger off Evolve pretty definitely with Ghor-Clan Rampager, but Blood Rush for combat tricks is definitely what he's meant to be in here for. So moving on, we have Hellrider. So he's a 3/3 for 4 with haste, and whenever a creature we control attacks, he's going to deal 1 damage to defending player, and that can be redirected to Planeswalkers. So if we need to redirect it to something like Liliana of the Veil, which is a pretty it's a pretty annoying card. Also, Garruk Primal Hunter and Jund is also fairly annoying as well, as far as Jund midrange goes, that is. So with numerous amounts of creatures, we're able to just trigger off Hellrider and be able to direct that damage however we want, whether it's to our opponent or to a Planeswalker, but he helps us connect as well, just like the Ghor-Clan Rampager would, in that he's going to deal a whole lot of damage based on how massive our board presence is. So Hellrider is like one of the best cards in this deck. From there, we're getting into the removal elements that we have in the deck. So we have our Abrupt Decays. So it can't be countered by spells or abilities, and we destroy target non-land permanent with converted mana cost 3 or less for 2 mana, 1 black and 1 green. So with Abrupt Decay, it's It's really important up against the decks that are running a lot of really early drop things. Luxodon Smiters, Boros Reckoners. Boros Reckoner is a huge problem in the meta, so you want to be able to get rid of Boros Reckoner with something like Abrupt Decay, but also Luxodon Smiter is pretty sizable as far as a blocker is going to go, and it can really just stall a game for a while. So Abrupt Decay is a nice means of being able to get rid of more creatures. So I like Abrupt Decay in there. And it deals with a fair bit of things, as well as like in the Esper matchups, it deals with Blind Obedience and Detention Spheres and stuff like that. We have Dreadbores in here as well, so I'm running 2 Dreadbores for a more it's a more concrete form of removal that doesn't really have any biases. So Dreadbore is destroy target creature or planeswalker for 2 mana, 1 black and 1 red. And with Dreadbore, the main reason why I decided to run it, even though it's a sorcery speed card, is the fact that it still gets rid of planeswalkers like Garruk Primal Hunter, and whenever they start making 3/3 tokens, it's kind of awkward to work your way around them if you don't have removal spells for that 3/3, and then you can successfully just go through and deal with the planeswalker itself. So Dreadbore is like a means of, all right, well, I get rid of your planeswalker, and if I have like the means of getting rid of your creature, I'm going to get rid of that too and just swing alpha on you. But Dreadbore, if we can't swing and get rid of a planeswalker, Dreadbore gets there and being able to just deal with it there. It also doesn't have any biases against creatures as far as like non-werewolf, non-vampire type things go, or monocolored, stuff like that. It deals with Reckoners, so that's pretty good as well. But speaking of biased removal, we do have Victim of Night here. So I'm running 2 Victim of Night. So it's destroy target non-vampire, non-werewolf, non-zombie for double black. So it's another means of being able to hit into a much less specific, even though this removal spell is very specific, it's much less specific than Ultimate Price because it lets us deal with Obsidots, it lets us deal with Boros Reckoners, it still lets us deal with Hellriders, Thundermaw, Hellkites. There's a lot of things that Victim of Night hits into, and it ended up being better than Ultimate Price because the meta was changing. So 2 Victim of Night to be able to deal with kind of more things, but Boros Reckoner and Obsidot are like 2 of the biggest things that you want to deal with, aside from all the other cards that are already good there. And then the last card in the main board is Searing Spear for us, so it's a 3/, so deals 3 damage to target creature or player for 2 mana. And essentially, we just use it for removal, or if we need to use it to burn out our opponent, we use it for that as well. But more times than none, it's going to be used for removal as far as playing up against other aggro-based matchups goes. So that's the main board that we have here for the deck. Now let's take a look at the sideboard. So in our sideboard here, the first card that we have is Deathrite Shaman. So Deathrite Shaman is actually a playset for us, and a lot of these Jund decks were actually running Deathrite Shaman in the main board, which is something that it's all right, but it wasn't something that I kind of favored. For me, Deathrite Shaman is more of a card that I really like to use in the sideboard, so I ended up just throwing it in the sideboard and running Lotleth Trolls because I really like Lotleth Troll in here. So Deathrite Shaman is really nice because it lets us exile either instants or creatures, and it pretty much comes down to what matchup we're playing against and what role he's going to be. Against the Reanimator decks, he is a way to just deal with them and not let them be able to use any Reanimate abilities. We can just get rid of the target that they're trying to target with Unburial Rites. I also side him in against Control and the Flash variants, like the USA Flash or Blue-White Flash, any of those decks as well, just because he's a passive creature, because more times than none he's not going to be swinging in. So stuff like Azorius Charm really isn't going to deal with him. We can play him early on, and whatever our opponent plays, we can just respond with, all right, Deathrite Shaman, exile your instant or sorcery from your grave, you lose 2 life. It's an easy way to just keep on shocking our opponent essentially every turn by getting rid of their instants and sorceries. So we have that means of just being able to kind of burn them out really quick with Deathrite Shaman. But Deathrite Shaman's 2 biggest roles are either I'm going to beat you down early game by having him out there, or I'm not going to let you combo off with a Reanimator. Those are the 2 things that I like about him the most. Then we have Tribute to Hunger. So Tribute to Hunger is a 2-of in the sideboard. So we are going to force our opponent to sacrifice a creature, and we gain life equal to that creature's toughness. The biggest thing is the the decks that are going to be running Geist of St. Traft. Geist of St. Traft is pretty annoying. Even though we have the means of being able to block him, they will usually just hold off Geist until they can get Restoration Angel, and then they can swing with Geist, throw down Restoration Angel, the Geist will flicker, and they still get to swing in with that 4/4 in the given turn. So Tribute to Hunger is a nice means of being able to get rid of Geist of St. Traft whenever they first cast it. So it's their turn 3, they drop Geist of St. Traft, we respond with Tribute to Hunger. We also gain life, but we get rid of that Geist of St. Traft, which is the biggest thing that we want to do up against those matchups. So Tribute to Hunger is definitely really nice up against the Geist matchups. I'm also running one Golgari Charm here, so it lets us regenerate all of our creatures if we want to. So up against the control matchups where they're running they're relying heavily on Supreme Verdict, we can side in the Golgari Charm and not have to worry about board wipers. At the same time, it's another means of being able to get rid of enchantments, so Blind Obedience and Detention Spheres and possibly even Oblivion Rings as well. The Golgari Charm is going to get there for that. So I like having one Golgari Charm on this side for kind of a means of, all right, well, I can really use 2 modes of it. I can either just be able to regenerate or just get rid of an enchantment that is giving me grief. And Blind Obedience is a pretty annoying card to have. Golgari Charm also can be used up against matchups where our opponents are running a lot of 1/1s. So the human variants, some of the human variants, it's not horrible to run it. It's a little bit slow for them, but sometimes the Golgari Charm does get there. But 99.99% of the time, it's only going to be the 2 modes that I'm using of it to regenerate or destroy artifacts. We also have 2 Abrupt Decays here, so more Abrupt Decays because 3 drops, the decks that run a lot of 1, 2, and 3 drops, it's just important to get rid of those creatures, especially things like Luxodon Smiters and Boros Reckoners. Those cards are really, really annoying, and they're really troublesome to get around. So 2 more Abrupt Decays that deal with stuff like that. Also, it deals with a lot of the red deck wins types of decks, humans as well, and also it's going to deal with the Boros decks as well, which kind of it can go either way. It can go towards the more red deck style or more human tribal, but either way, with aggro decks, Abrupt Decay is really good, but I really can't stress it enough. Boros Reckoner is a problem, so we want to have Abrupt Decay there. I'm also running one Grafdigger's Cage up against the Reanimator style decks and also some of the Flash decks as well. So creature cards can't enter the battlefield from graveyards or libraries, and players can't cast cards in graveyards or libraries. So sometimes if my opponent's playing a lot of flashback spells to be able to tap down or things like Feeling of Dread or Think Twice to draw a whole lot, I might side in Grafdigger's Cage. But the biggest thing is the Reanimator style decks, just because they won't really expect us to be running Ground Seal because that's not something that this deck is going to be doing. However, they won't really expect us to run Grafdigger's Cage as well. And the more gritty, the human Reanimator decks, they don't really run a whole lot of Abrupt Decays, if not Abrupt Decay at all. So we end up getting into it where Grafdigger Cage ends up being really good just because they don't really have the means of getting rid of artifacts. They have Ray of Revelation to get rid of enchantments, but they don't have anything for artifacts. So Grafdigger Cage ends up being really good up against the human Reanimator builds. I haven't seen much other Reanimator builds, but Grafdigger Cage definitely gets there against humans. Also 2 Rolling Temblor in the side to be able to deal 2 damage to each creature without flying. It also has a flashback for 6, which I don't really use all that often, but Rolling Temblor is nice up against really, really early game dependent aggro-based decks, so it's there for that. I'm also running 2 Slaughter games up against the Control and the mid-range, the Jund mid-range matchups, because we can name targets that they need to actually win the game or keep them in the game, like Thrag Tusks or any other possible win cons that they have. So Slaughter games ends up being really good because it can't be countered, and we can essentially name anything under the spectrum that would qualify as a win condition for them. So Slaughter games does get there. And then we have Zealous Conscripts. So Zealous Conscripts is really nice for this deck. It has haste, and it's a 3/3 for 5, and we get to take one of our opponent's permanents, untap it, and it also gains haste. So up against a lot of matchups, like a lot of the aggro matchups, like more mid-range style ones where they're focusing a little bit more on 3s and 4s. I like siding in the Zealous Conscripts because we can take something of theirs. Also, we have the Zealous Conscripts that has haste, and anything else that we have on our board we can swing alpha with, and oftentimes that really can set our opponent back a huge margin and potentially give us a really great advantage over them. But I do like the Zealous Conscripts in there. We can also take Planeswalkers and use our opponent's Planeswalker abilities as well, which is kind of funny. But Zealous Conscripts is pretty nice just as a one-of, and that's what I usually run it as in most of my sideboards. So that is the main board and the sideboard for this Jund aggro-based deck. So if you guys enjoyed it, please be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe for more Magic the Gathering content. The entire deck list is down below where you guys can check it out and use it as a reference. And yeah, so until next time, guys, have yourselves a wonderful, fun-filled Magic the Gathering day.